It was late at night, and Emma was scrolling through Craigslist, searching for a used couch to furnish her new apartment. She came across a post that caught her attention. It was for a beautiful leather couch, and the price was too good to pass up. She messaged the seller, and they agreed to meet the next day at a location near her apartment. The next day, Emma arrived at the designated meeting spot, a quiet alleyway. As she approached the seller, she began to feel uneasy. There was something off about him, something that made her skin crawl. He was tall and thin, with pale skin and dark circles under his eyes. He introduced himself as Jack and invited her to follow him to the storage unit where the couch was located. As they walked, Emma noticed that Jack kept looking over his shoulder, as if he was being followed. She started to feel nervous, but tried to push it aside. When they arrived at the storage unit, Jack opened the door and gestured for Emma to go inside. The space was dimly lit, with rows of cardboard boxes and furniture stacked against the walls. Emma took a step forward, but as she did, Jack suddenly slammed the door shut behind her, trapping her inside. She turned to face him, but before she could say anything, he pulled out a knife and lunged at her. Emma screamed and tried to fight back, but Jack was too strong. He overpowered her and dragged her deeper into the storage unit. Hours passed, and Emma was still trapped in the storage unit with Jack. She was bruised and battered, and her screams for help had gone unanswered. Jack had left her alone for a few moments, and Emma took the opportunity to try and escape. She managed to wiggle free of the ropes that bound her hands and crawled towards the door. But just as she was about to reach it, Jack appeared out of nowhere and grabbed her ankle, pulling her back. Emma was terrified. She knew she had to find a way out before it was too late. She remembered her phone was in her pocket and tried to reach for it, but Jack was too quick. He snatched it out of her hands and smashed it against the wall. Emma was running out of options. She had to think fast. She noticed a piece of metal lying nearby and grabbed it. Jack was distracted, trying to find something in one of the boxes. Emma seized the opportunity and swung the metal rod at his head. There was a sickening thud, and Jack collapsed to the ground. Emma scrambled to her feet and ran towards the door, her heart pounding in her chest. She burst through the door and into the alleyway, gasping for air. She could hear Jack's footsteps behind her, but she didn't stop running. She kept running until she reached a crowded street and collapsed on the ground, sobbing. The police arrived soon after and took Jack into custody. Emma was taken to the hospital, where she received treatment for her injuries. She was grateful to be alive, but the experience had left her traumatized. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching her, waiting for their chance to strike. Months went by, and Emma tried to move on from the incident. But every time she logged on to Craigslist, she felt a sense of dread. She couldn't help but wonder if there were other people out there like Jack, waiting to prey on unsuspecting victims. One day, Emma received an email from an anonymous sender. It contained a link to a Craigslist post advertising a used couch for sale. The post had the same title and description as the one she had seen before. Emma's heart raced as she stared at the post, unsure of what to do. Was this some sick joke, or was someone really trying to lure her into another trap? She debated with herself for hours, trying to decide if she should report the post to the police or simply ignore it. In the end, curiosity got the better of her, and she decided to investigate. She created a fake email address and messaged the seller, pretending to be interested in the couch. The seller responded quickly, and they arranged to meet the next day. Emma knew it was risky, but she couldn't resist the chance to confront whoever was behind the post. She arrived at the meeting spot early and hid behind a nearby building, watching as a tall, thin man with dark circles under his eyes approached. It was Jack. Emma's heart raced as she watched him walk towards her, his eyes scanning the area. She knew she had to act fast. She stepped out from behind the building and confronted him. "What the hell are you doing, Jack? Are you trying to lure me into another trap?" Jack's eyes widened in surprise. and he took a step back. "I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just trying to sell a couch." Emma wasn't convinced. "I know it's you, Jack. You're the one who attacked me in that storage unit. How could I forget your face?" Jack's expression darkened, and he lunged towards her. Emma tried to dodge him, but he caught her by the arm and pulled her towards him. "You think you can just run away from me? You're mine, Emma. You'll always be mine." Emma's heart raced as she struggled to break free. She knew she was in danger, but she refused to give up without a fight. She kicked and punched at Jack, trying to get him to release her. Just when she thought all hope was lost, she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. The police had arrived. They tackled Jack to the ground and placed him under arrest. Emma collapsed on the ground, sobbing with relief. She had finally confronted her attacker and lived to tell the tale. It was a long and difficult road to recovery, but with the support of her friends and family, she was able to move on. Years went by, and Emma tried to put the trauma of her experience behind her. She never forgot what had happened, but she refused to let it define her. She went on to live a happy and fulfilling life, never again allowing herself to be a victim. But every once in a while, when she was alone at night, she couldn't help but wonder if there were others out there like Jack, waiting to strike. She couldn't shake the feeling that she would always be looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next Craigslist horror story to unfold. I moved to the city to start a new life. Fresh out of college, I was eager to leave my small town and experience everything the big city had to offer. I found a job, an apartment, and I was ready to take on the world. But the rent in the city was expensive, and I needed a roommate to help cover the costs. So, I turned to Craigslist. I posted an ad, looking for a roommate who was responsible, clean, and respectful. Within a few days, I received a response from a guy named Mark. He seemed nice enough, and his email was articulate and well-written. We arranged to meet at a nearby coffee shop to discuss the living arrangements. Mark showed up on time, and we hit it off right away. He was personable, intelligent, and seemed like a good fit for the apartment. We talked for an hour, and before I knew it, I had agreed to let him move in. The first few weeks were great. Mark was quiet and kept to himself, but he paid his rent on time and kept the apartment clean. But then things started to change. I noticed that Mark would sometimes stay up all night, pacing back and forth in his room. He would mutter to himself, and I could hear him talking in hushed tones. It was unnerving, but I tried to brush it off as just a quirk. But then I started to notice other things. Mark would disappear for days at a time, and when he came back, he would be covered in scratches and bruises. He refused to talk about where he had been or what had happened to him. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone moving around in the apartment. I assumed it was Mark, but when I opened my bedroom door, I saw that his door was closed. The sound was coming from the living room. I crept towards the living room, and that's when I saw it. Mark was sitting on the couch, staring at a blank TV screen. But there was something off about him. His eyes were sunken, and his skin was pale and clammy. And then he turned to me, and I saw that his eyes were completely black. No whites, no pupils, just black. I screamed and ran back to my room, locking the door behind me. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, Mark acted like nothing had happened. He made small talk, went to work, and came home like usual. But I couldn't shake the image of those black eyes from my mind. That night, I decided to confront him. I knocked on his door, and when he opened it, I saw that his eyes were back to normal. But something else was off. His room was completely empty. There was no bed, no dresser, no clothes. Just a bare room. I asked him about it, and he just laughed. He said that he had moved everything out because he didn't want to be weighed down by material possessions. I knew he was lying, but I didn't push it. That was the last straw for me. I couldn't take it anymore. I went back to Craigslist and started looking for a new roommate. And that's when I saw it. A warning, from someone who had rented to Mark before. They said that he was dangerous, that he had done unspeakable things to them and their family, and that they were lucky to be alive. I moved out that same day. I didn't leave a forwarding address, and I never heard from Mark again. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I swear I can hear his voice in my head. Whispering things I don't want to repeat. And I know that he's out there, somewhere, waiting for his next victim. I warn anyone who is looking for a roommate on Craigslist to be careful. You never know who might be lurking behind the emails and text messages. As a broke college student, Rachel had become accustomed to looking for part-time gigs on Craigslist. She had never had any issues before, until she responded to an ad for a house-sitting job. The pay was good, and the house was in a nice neighborhood, so Rachel decided to take the job. The house was a beautiful Victorian-era mansion, with sprawling gardens and a grand entrance. The owner, a middle-aged man named David, showed Rachel around and gave her a set of keys. He said he would be back in a few days, and told her to make herself at home. Rachel settled in and began her duties. She watered the plants, fed the cat, and cleaned the house. But as the days went by, strange things started to happen. Doors would open and close on their own, and Rachel heard footsteps in the hallways when she was alone. She tried to brush it off, telling herself that it was just her imagination. One night, as Rachel was watching TV in the living room, she heard a loud banging on the front door. She got up to check, but when she opened the door, there was no one there. She shrugged it off and went back to watching TV. But then, she heard the banging again. This time, it was coming from inside the house. Rachel's heart raced as she followed the noise to the basement. She slowly opened the door, and a gust of cold air hit her. She descended the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. In the basement, Rachel saw a figure standing in the corner. It was a woman, dressed in Victorian-era clothing. Her face was pale and her hair was tangled. Rachel tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman started to move towards her, her eyes fixed on Rachel's. Rachel ran back up the stairs and out of the house, not even bothering to lock the door. She ran down the street, not stopping until she was miles away. She called the police and told them what had happened. They went to investigate, but when they arrived, there was no sign of the woman or any other paranormal activity. Rachel never went back to the house, and she never heard from David again. She learned later that the house had a history of strange occurrences, and that the woman she had seen in the basement was a ghost that haunted the property. From that day forward, Rachel avoided Craigslist and never took another house-sitting job again. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ghost was still watching her, waiting for her to return. Months went by, and Rachel tried to put the incident behind her. She focused on her studies and her part-time job at a local coffee shop. But one day, while she was scrolling through Craigslist, a new ad caught her eye. It was for a house-sitting job, with great pay and a beautiful house. Rachel tried to ignore it, but something in her was drawn to the ad. She responded to the ad, and soon enough, she found herself at the house. It was a modern mansion, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a sleek design. The owner, a young couple named Mark and Emily, showed her around and gave her the keys. They said they would be back in a few days, and told her to make herself at home. Rachel settled in, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She felt like she was being watched, and every sound made her jump. On the third day, while she was making breakfast, she heard a voice whisper her name. She turned around, but no one was there. Rachel's heart raced as she tried to figure out where the voice came from. She dismissed it as her imagination and went back to cooking. As the day went on, the strange occurrences increased. Objects started to move on their own, and Rachel heard footsteps when she was alone. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that it was just her mind playing tricks on her. That night, Rachel was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep when she heard the sound of someone walking down the hallway. She got up and opened the door, but there was no one there. She shrugged it off and went back to bed. But then, she heard the footsteps again. This time, they were coming from inside the room. Rachel's heart raced as she saw a figure standing in the corner. It was a woman, dressed in Victorian-era clothing. Her face was pale and her hair was tangled. Rachel tried to scream, but no sound came out. The woman started to move towards her, her eyes fixed on Rachel's. Rachel ran out of the room and down the stairs, her heart pounding in her chest. She grabbed her belongings and ran out of the house, not even bothering to lock the door. She ran down the street, not stopping until she was miles away. The next day, Rachel went to the police and reported the incident. They investigated the house, but found no sign of the woman or any other paranormal activity. Rachel realized that she had fallen victim to the same ghost that had haunted the previous house she had house sat. She decided to leave town and start anew. She never went back to Craigslist and never took another house-sitting job again. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ghost was still watching her, waiting for her to return. Years went by, and Rachel had put the incident behind her. She had a successful career and a loving family. But one day, while she was at work, she received an email. It was from David, the owner of the first house she had house sat. The email read, "Rachel, I know what happened to you in my house. I'm sorry I didn't warn you about the ghost. But I have a proposition for you. I need someone to help me get rid of the ghost once and for all. Are you up for the challenge?" Rachel hesitated but then decided to accept the offer. She met with David, and together, they came up with a plan to get rid of the ghost. They contacted a psychic medium who specialized in ghost removal, and together, they went back to the house. The psychic medium performed a series of rituals and chants, and slowly but surely, the ghost started to fade away. Rachel felt a sense of relief wash over her as the ghost disappeared. She had finally conquered her fear and put the ghost to rest. From that day forward, Rachel never heard from David again. She learned to appreciate the power of the unknown and the importance of facing her fears. She moved on with her life, but she never forgot the ghost that had haunted her on Craigslist.